Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, Sofia Smallstorm returns to the show. Sofia will talk to us about the work of the late Jean Liedloff, whose groundbreaking book, The Continuum Concept, documents the child-rearing practices of the Yequana Indians in Venezuela, and how the Yequana's approach results in happy and well-balanced children. It is a parenting style which is very different from that of most Western societies. We also discuss the next steps of a technological society and what that means to humanity. And so without further ado, here is Sofia Smallstorm. Well, Sofia, thank you once again for coming back on the show. We always have some great conversations. And today we're going to talk about your June 2017 newsletter, where you talk about a book called The Continuum Concept, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But before we get into your newsletter, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about my benefits from taking Restore. And I've been on Restore now, I guess, for about 2 months. And the biggest benefit that I have gotten from Restore, and it's a big one, is that my acid reflux has essentially gone away. And I've had acid reflux for a very long time. At one time, I was on the medication for it, and I got off that about, I would say, 2 years ago or so. And then in order to control it, what I had to do was watch essentially everything that I eat. And since I've been taking Restore, I haven't really had to monitor what foods I can eat and what foods I cannot eat, because things like Italian dishes or Mexican dishes, that would instantaneously, as soon as I finished up having that meal, I would have acid reflux, I would have heartburn. And I have had no heartburn whatsoever since I've been taking Restore. I've been taking a teaspoon in the morning and a teaspoon in the evening. So I just wanted to tell you that because we did the show, and when we did the show on Restore, I knew nothing about the product. And right afterwards, I started taking it, and the benefits have been phenomenal.
Well, Mike, I'm so glad to hear that personal testimony. It's wonderful when it solves a problem that actually affects your lifestyle. But that problem probably goes deeper. You probably had a gut issue that made you very sensitive to spicy and acidic foods. And as a person who's half Italian, I can't imagine the trouble you had. You know, every time you're faced with pasta and red sauce, you can't eat it, right?
Right. Every time I went to Mom's house. What I would have to do is I would have to take like a Pepsid AC before I went to dinner. And I really didn't like doing that because I knew that these drugs were not good for you. I was at a point where I was saying to myself, well, what else am I going to do? Am I just going to tell my family that you got to make something else? You know, so I would just take the Pepsid AC and go about my business. I tried to minimize the amount of times I had to take it, but that was the routine, Sofia. And I don't have that routine anymore. Like I said, I take the Restore twice a day, and I can have Italian food, I can have Mexican food, and there are no issues.
Well, it's like problem solved, right?
Yep.
And what I'm also noting is that you're taking 2/3 of the recommended dose if you're actually only taking a teaspoon each time, because the recommended dose is 3 teaspoons a day, 1 full tablespoon. That is the mathematical equivalent. 3 teaspoons equals 1 tablespoon. And they suggest you break it up and do 1 teaspoon before each meal. Most people eat 3 times a day. I also take 1 teaspoon twice a day. And that has worked for me. One thing I noticed, I'm actually pretty shocked. Many years ago when we had the first cordless phones, I was addicted to mine. It was one of the older, weaker 900 megahertz cordless phones. But you know how you could just be anywhere. I could clean, I could be in the kitchen, I could do packages for my online business. I carried this damn phone around with me. It was on my shoulder, and I put a horrible crick in my neck, which subsequently took over a year to relax when I stopped using this cordless phone. But the worst effect of the phone, which I didn't connect with use of the phone, because at the time I didn't know about EMFs, I began to have a fluttering eardrum. It was like a moth trapped in my right ear. And this thing would just flutter all the time. Sometimes it would stop for a few hours. Sometimes it would stop for a week or so, but it was always there. And I started to get worried about it. I figured as I got wiser to the damage that EMFs do, electromagnetic frequencies, radio frequencies rather, I figured, well, I've just damaged my right eardrum. and I wasn't impairing my hearing, but it was keeping me awake at night, like this moth trapped in my head.
Yeah.
And I noticed just about 3 weeks ago, I realized it's gone. I don't have it fluttering anymore. Could that be Restore? Could that be the effect of Restore, that it actually healed that messed up eardrum? So that's my personal story, my most recent. And the dreams, Mike, oh my God, the dreams are amazing. Deep, deep dreams, extremely detailed. The kind of dreams you don't want to leave, and you're very excited each night to see what kind of adventure the night is going to bring, right?
Well, I've noticed that my sleep got very, very good. My sleep patterns got much, much better. Not that I had bad sleep before, but sometimes I might wake up once or twice during the course of the night. And since I've been on the Restore, I go to bed and I don't wake up till the morning. So that's another thing. And the third benefit, now that I think about it, is just clarity of mind. I just never feel like my mind is bogged down or cloudy. It seems very, very sharp. So now, could that be the Restore? I don't know. I just know that in the 2-month period of time that I've been taking it, those are the three things that I have picked up on. The acid reflux for sure is restored. There's no question about it. But the sleep, I'm going to assume that the Restore played a part in that. And as far as the clarity of mind, we'll have to see.
I think it definitely helps in terms of brain fog. That's one of the reported benefits early on by people. And also, the way I put it is this, that when your cell membranes are leaky, whether it's your gut firewall or your cell membranes in general, you have stuff swirling around in your body. There is a chaotic business going on biochemically, and your body registers that in a kind of despair. Your cells are going, what the hell? I don't know what to do now. Look, this is here, that is there. I can't keep calcium in or out. I mean, these are all electrical processes, and radio frequencies especially shatter cell membranes. So Restore helps to rebuild those cell membranes and other things in your body. It actually restores the proper metabolic matrix, you could say, because it's bringing these carbon metabolites into your system that we lack because of what technology has done to modern soil. So what I am impressed with is that when your body is more orderly on the level of its metabolism, literally stuff isn't swirling to all the wrong places and things are being kept out and in as they should be, you know it. You feel stronger. You feel better. You feel happier. That cellular state of, God, what a mess, doesn't translate up into your conscious state. That's what I have noticed. You feel this term well-being is for real because it translates into a mental stability, and your mind is now working properly. You're not always having to deal with subliminal signaling that stuff is going wrong.
Yeah, it's very hard to put words around. It's just a sense that you have about yourself and a feeling you have about yourself where you know what? I feel really good. I'm feeling very sharp. My thinking is very clear. I don't feel tired. Again, it's hard to put words around it, folks, but I can tell you that for 2 months, I've noticed a difference. And as I mentioned, the heartburn piece of it is a big, big plus for me.
Well, I just want people to know that I am continuing to sell it. And now that people are past their first introductory bottle, I am offering multiple bottle deals. I could also ship you a case of it, and the shipping would be free, and that way you would have a year's supply or a 2-year supply. Some people have expressed to me that they're nervous that the FDA is going to not make this available, and then what do I do? And so it might be good to have a few on hand, and especially if you're taking less than the recommended dose, which I think a lot of people can get away with the 2 teaspoons a day. I know lots of people who do that. Children take less, for instance. You might not want to be on an auto ship with Restore, which is possible, and that is discounted, but I can do something similar. Get it to you in quantity for a better price. But people have to just contact me through avatarproducts.com and mention exactly how much they would like and want to pay for at this time, and then I'll do the best deal I can. So I love the stuff. I can't say enough about it.
Yeah, I've had folks on my Facebook page that, since our show, have taken it to Sofia, and they have written to me and said, Mike, it's really outstanding that they have seen clear benefits by being on the Restore. Now, this kind of segues, I think, nicely into what we're going to talk about next, because it's really getting back to basics, getting back to a natural, organic environment and so on for wellness and well-being. There's a book out that I haven't read yet, Sofia, but I did read your newsletter. I do have the book. I told you I'm reading a big book on Madame Blavatsky right now, so as soon as I finish that, I can get to this. But it's called The Continuum Concept. It's very interesting, and I think it's very closely tied to the show that we did on the Piraha Indians. Once you read these books, or once you understand the concept of these books, you come to the realization that we have drifted so far from the mothership that it's virtually incomprehensible. I struggle with it, to be honest with you, when I take a look at where we are societally and culturally, and then when we go back and take a look how these tribes live. It's a gigantic disconnect. And we are told that we are more advanced and we're better off, but when you start to wrap your head around this, you think to yourself, maybe we're not. Maybe we're not better off. That there's something to be said with how these tribes are taking care of their family and taking care of themselves. So with that, maybe you can just take us a little bit through the Continuum Concept and how did you get to actually research it? How did you fall into reading the book?
Well, Mike, people always tell me, oh, you need to read this book or that book. You really need to read it. And sometimes I cave in and I say, all right, and I go and buy it. And sometimes people send me books, but I have this stack of unread books. And I was walking by the stack for a number of weeks, and the top book on the stack was at that point the Continuum Concept, because I had taken the one that was on top of that off and finished reading that. And I kept looking at it going, what's this about? Is it about psychology? Is it about metaphysics? I had no idea. And I was too lazy to pick it up and open it and figure out what it was about. And then one day I was ready to read it, and I just grabbed it. I started to read, and I couldn't believe it. So the author is this Jean Liedloff. And Jean was actually a very well-connected woman who lived in New York, and the book was written in the 70s, I believe. And she was at a party in Paris, and it was at some count's house, a count, like an aristocratic count. And she met two Italians, and they said, hey, we're going to the Amazon in 20 minutes. You want to come? She didn't know these people, and on a lark, she said, why not? Grabbed her stuff from the hotel. They made the train that was leaving, and then they subsequently got on a plane, and they went to Venezuela. There she encountered this tribe called the Yequana, Yequana. They are basically back in the Stone Age. And one thing she observed about them right off the bat was, besides the fact that they were near naked and barefoot, that their children were perfectly behaved. And I'll read from my newsletter. The Yequana children were children who never misbehaved, never fought, never whined, nagged, bullied in the desire to get something, never even endangered themselves, as we are always expecting children to do, burning themselves on hot stoves, falling into bodies of water, and out of windows. Yequana babies never had colic, indigestion, and never spat up. They didn't kick, scream, wriggle, struggle, or cry for any length of time. The only tools the Yequana had were axes, canoes, and a way to make fires. A few had shirts and pants, but if any of them wore any fabric at all, it was in the form of a sling in which they carried their babies all the time. And this is the basis of the Continuum Concept. The continuum means you came out of your mother, you were in contact with her body while you were in gestation, in utero, you were in her body. And now when you get out of it, babies need a transition period. They want to now be on that body. They want to be held by it and taken everywhere with it. And this is what Western mothers just don't do.
So the baby comes out of the womb, and the baby's instinct naturally is to have that connection still with the mother. And what struck me, Sophia, when I was reading the newsletter is that today a woman gets pregnant, let's say she works, she gets 6 weeks of maternity leave. That's it. And then after the 6 weeks, she's got to figure out what to do with that baby. The point being is somebody else is going to care for the baby. It's not the maternal mother, and certainly the baby's not going to be carried around. This is a gigantic disconnect here, folks. I mean, this is when I started reading Sophia's newsletter, I'm thinking, because I have my daughter, I remember when she was a baby, and we were doing things which I thought were the right things to do. And after reading this newsletter, I'm almost afraid to read the book, because it's going to point out all the things which really were the wrong things to do. But we were taught that the things that we were doing were the right things to do.
So, Mike, you were mentioning that we were taught the wrong things to do, but what I'm going to do is go deeper than that. So one of the headings at the beginning of my newsletter is adult orphans. So what is an orphan? An orphan is a child who's lost his parents, right? When we are spat out of our mother upon birth, we lose her. I believe Janice Barcelo's work relates to what Jean Liedloff says in the Continuum Concept, which was actually written in 1975, as I mentioned, that we're swaddled in cloths, we're handled by others. I mean, terrible things are done to us in this process of what Janice called birth trauma. But basically, we are not thereafter in constant contact with our mother's warm body and real skin. So this creates an orphan. And Jean Liedloff writes that when she was in the jungle, she was adopted by the family of the Yequana chief. She said, although I was not technically an orphan, I had never felt accepted by my mother, and although she and I both lived in New York at the time, I did not live with her, nor did my sister, who lived alone, also in New York, with her daughter. My father, long since divorced from my mother, lived somewhere in Maine. I knew not precisely where. I was embarrassed by the Yequana women's bewilderment at these living arrangements. They could not understand why my sister and I did not live with our mother. How could I explain to them that members of my tribe were so alienated that we expected people to want to live in separate quarters from their families, and even to feel put upon if, as adults, they had to live with their parents? More than bewilderment, the women had shown signs of fear, as though these solitary creatures, of whom I was one, were a cause for anxiety. And we are, Mike, because what we've missed is what Jean Liedloff, the author of the book, calls the in-arms phase. This is when we should have been constantly riding on the body we just left, on the hip, crooked in an arm, and watching and being part of everything that person is doing, because that's what babies want. Babies, they love to be in the center of things. They don't want to be stuck in a crib, staring at the ceiling, getting used to this 4-hour feeding schedule that the books recommend, and crying themselves to sleep. It is amazing the things she starts to observe about the body language of babies. She says, it is understandable that Western babies are not welcome in offices, shops, workrooms, or even dinner parties. They usually shriek and kick, wave their arms, and stiffen their bodies, so that one needs 2 hands and a lot of attention to keep them under control. When they are picked up, they are rigid with tension, which is the result of being keyed up with undischarged energy from spending so much time out of contact with an active person's body. So the in-arms phase is a vital experience for infants. That's where they get a feel for the pace and the activities and the sounds and the sights and the temperature changes and all the different things that compose life for this baby, life around this baby. And babies in the jungle are carried around by active persons who discharge energy for both of them. And that leaves this discharging of energy is a very, very important concept that I never knew before. But a baby whose energy is not discharged, because babies are basically wriggly, limp little things. They don't have muscle tone and coordination yet, very young babies, you know. When they're being carried everywhere and bounced and juggled and jiggled and walked with and run with, you are discharging their energy for them. And if you don't do that, then these babies stay in what she calls a twitchy, irritable state. And she believes this is a principal contributor to the stress that produces colic, indigestion. You know, I've noticed this, and I'm not a baby person, but I've seen babies, modern babies, they like arch and they stiffen and they flex and then they kick in this spastic way. That's because they have undischarged energy.
As you were speaking, I was thinking to myself, we are taught that what we're doing as parents is the natural thing. Cry themselves to sleep, get them on a feeding schedule, not holding them all the time, because we're told if you hold the baby all the time, what's going to happen is you're basically going to spoil them.
Right. That's what keeps the baby connected to you. That's that transitional phase. And sooner or later, the baby will want to be put down. She calls it the creeping, crawling. You know, creeping. When I was learning Egoscue realignment, there's a position they have that's called pre-crawl. And you see babies sleeping like this. Babies will be on their stomachs. Now, you're also supposed to sleep with your baby in the same bed. And we're taught never, never. You could roll over. You could suffocate, crush your baby. But anyway, when a baby lies on its stomach and one arm is crooked up near its head and one leg is out and folded with the knee bent, that's called pre-crawl. So the baby is already learning to put its body in a position of being splayed out, which will teach it how to then splay and support its weight, right?
Right.
So anyway, these first 6 months of life, you're supposed to carry the baby around. You're supposed to have him with you everywhere, not put him down or give him to somebody else to hold. And that's what babies like. They want to be jiggled and taken everywhere and be in the center of things. This is how they learn. This is how they process what life is all about. But I'm going to read one of the letters that she got after she wrote the book. A reader wrote this. I think your book was one of the cruelest things I've ever read. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't have written it. I'm not even saying that I wish I hadn't read it. It's simply that it impressed me profoundly, hurt me deeply, intrigued me greatly. I do not want to face the possible truth of your theory. It's a wonder to me, as a matter of fact, that you weren't tarred and feathered at some stage. Do you know, I honestly believe that because I thought all the aggravation mothers go through with babies was normal and unavoidable, that was why I was able to endure it at all. Now that you have intruded into my mind the idea that it could be otherwise, well, I don't mind telling you that for 24 hours after reading your book, I was so depressed I felt like shooting myself.
Yeah. I don't know if I would go that far for me personally, but like I mentioned, I read the newsletter and I'm going to read the book, and I said I'm almost afraid to read the book. I know exactly where she's coming from, because you did all these things as a parent thinking that you were doing the right things. And then after understanding the concepts of this book, you realize that you were doing virtually everything wrong. And the other thing is, I wanted to mention, Sofia, and I think you do cover this in the newsletter also, is that many of the how-to books that are out there, they're written by men, doctors or whatnot, trying to explain, or pediatricians, how a mother's supposed to raise their child, how they're supposed to handle their child and interact with their child. And it's bizarre. It's bizarre because when you think about it and you take a step back, you think to yourself, well, should it be instinctual? Should it be that the mother has the baby and the mother goes by her instincts with regard to interacting with the baby, bonding with the baby, understanding the baby? So what Western society has done, our culture has done, was introduced this wedge into that equation. Instead of going with their instincts, they're going with authority figures.
And one thing she says, you had mentioned that what we're taught is wrong, and I said something about that it's not really wrong, but what we could say is it's adversarial to nature. And she mentions that. She says, today normal is actually adversarial. The baby arrives, and it has an innate expectation that it will be among trustworthy allies. That's not what happens. From the baby's point of view, he or she feels like they're not on my side. Whatever I want, they say no. I want to be with my mother. I want to be close. I want to be safe. I want to be with someone alive who's breathing and warm and smells right and feels right, who touches me, helps me feel my own flesh appropriately, not a lifeless box with a lifeless cloth. I don't want to hear myself screaming in my own ears and hear others screaming around me, like in a hospital nursery, and get no response. When I scream, I expect something to happen. Not just to scream, but because I'm waiting, I'm expecting something, and it doesn't come, and I scream and scream until I'm exhausted. And she says that that screaming is a signaling. And it's not just for more attention, it's actually a demand for the appropriate kind of experience. Much of a baby's frustration is due to his inability to make his signals bring about anything right. And then she says, and I italicized this part of the quote, it's perfectly clear that the millions of babies who are crying at this very moment want unanimously to be next to a live body. Do you really think they're all wrong? Theirs is the clear, pure voice of nature. Now, another thing that I found fascinating was when these babies get attention, what do they start doing? They gurgle, they smile. I mean, it's very hard to resist that. And what they're doing is they're signaling to you that they like this and they want more of it. And you pick them up and you croon to them and you might walk around with them a little bit. You might rattle their rattle in front of their face, but eventually you put them down. That continued experience that they've been encouraging you to give them stops. And they start screaming again. And you're told by the books and by the logic of Western common sense, well, you just have to leave them. They have to get used to it. I mean, they can't be around somebody all the time. It's in violation of their need. They need to be near human activity, in the middle of the activity. One woman said that she had a baby that was young enough to do this with, and she would take him everywhere. She said, I never put him down. I took him into the bath with me. I mean, when she went to the bathroom, she had the baby on her lap, I guess. She said, when I made the bed, I tossed him about in the sheets, and he loved it. This is what babies want. And when you talk about the father and the mother, I had read many years ago that, fathers are cautioned to exercise more care with their babies because they'll grab them by the arms and swing them, and they'll do all these crazy things with them. Well, babies actually like that. And so one sex or gender gives babies a slightly rougher time and smells different and has a scratchy face and a deep voice. And the other sex or gender has the higher tinkly voice that babies find, closer to their own and doesn't have all the scratchy hair and the coarse behavior. And so this way the baby starts to acclimate to gender difference. Its dad likes to do rougher things with it. Its mother does more gentle things with it. But it wants to be around both of them. And even the Yequana children as young as 3, have infant babies sitting on their hips that they naturally know how to take care of. And this is the give your child a doll syndrome that we've replaced that real human baby handling with. Infants can be handled by small children because small children were recently infants and they remember.
Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but it just strikes me how far we have drifted from what is natural. And with kids today, we see all kinds of problems. But then that kind of segues into the kids when they start to get into school age. Many of them are not very well behaved. I was thinking to myself, well, the foundation that was supposed to be there for the first 6 months of life was not there. And again, I know that, some parents just are not very good parents and so on, but I'm just saying that all things being equal, when you start off building the house the wrong way, you're not going to end up with the house that you wanted. And I think that that's a big problem with what we have with the youth today as these kids get older.
When babies encourage us, they smile and they gurgle and they say, do more, I like this, I need it. And then we put them back in their cribs. She talks about diaper changing time. And it's so sad, that part, Mike, because here's the baby being handled. It wants to be handled by another person. And yet its mother, when she changes the diapers, her actions are brisk, and the baby senses her distaste. at the smell of what he's produced, right? But he's still getting this brief comfort and this ever precious human touch. And now I'm going to quote from the book. The infant's pleasure at being attended and touched becomes mixed with a bewilderment that is the precursor of fear and guilt. The fear of displeasing his mother grows with cognition, and her displeasure is occasioned by an increasing number of his actions, including pulling her hair, spilling his food, drooling on her clothes, and mysteriously on some clothes more than others, poking his fingers in her mouth, pulling her necklace, throwing his rattle or teddy bear out of his carriage, or knocking over a teacup with an unaimed kick. Most of these acts are difficult to connect with her negative reaction. But that is what happens in our culture, because mothers have clothes they've paid good money for. They don't have the bare skin. They have hair that they've got barrettes, and it's pinned and twisted into shape and clipped, and the baby wants to pull at these things, and the mother goes, no, ow, don't do that. And then when she's handling his stinky diapers, she's got her nose, kind of in a weird curled up nose and face and turning away from it. And now, what's hilarious? The Yequana, they all have a standard bowl haircut. You can show that picture, that page of pictures I sent, right?
Yeah.
There's no hair to mess up. And they're all nude, basically. And so she writes in the book that when a Yequana infant poops or pees and the mother feels it because she's got the infant on her hip, the first thing she does is laugh and hold the baby as far away as she can and let him dribble right onto the jungle floor. And there's no mess, right? The river is nearby. You just swish the baby in the river. You don't have like Yves Saint Laurent clothes to mess up.
Or expensive rugs and floors and stuff like that.
And these babies don't have to wear these gross diapers, these Pampers. So that's where you start getting this registration. My God, everything I do, she doesn't like it. I'm doing something wrong. Because no is the word that small children hear all the time. No, don't touch that. Don't do this. And one other thing that she points out in the book that seems to be a remarkable result of allowing children to develop on their own is that these Yequana babies are put in incredibly dangerous places, like riverbanks and whatnot. Now, this is when they're toddling around, and they never fall in. They know how to keep themselves safe. And yet our children are constantly, we build fences around our swimming pools, and invariably they still fall in, And so we have all this tragedy, and it's from over monitoring and giving too little of that constant contact, which gives the babies a sense of security and that they belong in the world and they know how to get along in it.
Yeah, and let me just cover this a little bit. I don't want to digress, but that I'm a hypnotherapist and I do a lot of regression. And one of the points I want to get across to the audience is that adults often will say that a child doesn't understand because they're too young. As an example, if two parents are yelling at each other, having a fight, and the baby's a year old or 2 years old, or whatever, even younger, that the parents believe falsely that whatever's going on there, that interaction, that anger, is not being understood and interpreted by the baby. That's completely wrong. I know for a fact, Sofia, when I do the regressions, I'll take a client back into the womb, then they come out of the womb and they're born. They are aware, very, very aware of their surroundings. And they are also very, very aware of the interactions, especially when it comes to the mother. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there might be some that are listening and saying, well, how could a baby really be affected by the mother turning her nose a certain way because he dirtied his diaper? Or how could a baby at 6 months old or 9 months old really understand that the mother is upset because he spilt his juice on the rug? I'm going to tell you that the baby does understand. I've been at this, Sofia, for 7 years. Client after client after client, when I regress them and I take them back and we do that type of work, as a baby, as an infant, they have a sense of what's going on, and they can take this stuff in and they understand it and they interpret it. So I just want to get that out there because some folks are going to say, I don't think it's possible that a baby can really interpret the mother's facial expressions when she's changing the diaper or if the baby spills his drink. You're down the wrong path because the baby is taking that in and understanding it.
No, I believe you. I think that's fascinating, all the regressions you do and going even into the womb. But yeah, I mean, the first thing babies start learning is the sub-language part of interaction. That they might not understand the details of a divorce proceeding that their parents are discussing in the same room, when they're a year old or whatever, but they will understand the tones and register that there's unfriendliness around them, that their two parents, the people they see the most, are divided against one another. They take in so much, but what I did not appreciate was how they want to be right in the middle of things. Babies, I mean, all we do in our culture, Mike, is we bounce them on our knee a little bit, we walk with them, we pat them on the back, but they want to be everywhere. And that's why they're into everything. The thing is, our things that they get into cost money, and we don't want those things broken or spoiled by the baby. Whereas the Yequana, they even give their babies sharp knives. They don't hand it to them, but if the baby picks up a sharp knife, it's not the end of the world. The baby doesn't cut himself on the sharp knife for some strange reason. So maybe that is a result of the whole way they raise them. And what the point I'd like to make now, because we started with restore in this show, is these tribes have a connection to the earth, and they have a connection to the sun and the outdoors. And so here's my theory now. This is my deep theory, that however you want to explain the migrations of populations to colder climates and latitudes, the people who were in the colder areas started losing connection with the earth because it was colder. The earth was too damp and wet and cold to be barefoot on, and they lost the presence and availability of the sun. So they had to put shoes on, build shelters, find ways to contain warmth and fire in interiors so they could keep their body temperature up. And they had to invent and innovate ways to make their lives easier because food wasn't as plentiful. They couldn't just reach out and pluck a banana off a tree. So they're now in a situation where they are technology dependent, and they're forced to invent more and more technologies to take care of themselves and their little enclave that they live in. And they're separated increasingly from the earth. They've lost the sun, and their genetics recede. They get lighter skin. Now, melanin is a biopolymer that adds structure and strength to the skin. So the white skin is weaker. It wrinkles and crinkles more easily. It's more subject to degeneration and disease. The cells die faster. Of course, these problem-solving, technologically inclined people, their intellect had to get up to the task of inventing constantly. So they had high intellects that became a matter of genetics, perhaps. And then they also were increasingly separated because the way that culture naturally flowed was, oh my gosh, I can't ask my neighbor for help because we've got house and space and separation between us. I'm needing to innovate more technologies to enhance and assist me rather than reaching out to people who are farther and farther away. So the insulation brought by separation and the reliance on you've got to solve your own problem. You've got to think up one more gizmo that will make this task easier. It made us competitive, Mike, instead of cooperative. And that's why we've ended up where we are now, constantly and continually being isolated, separated, atomized. As my guest Joe Atwill said the other day, we're atomized. We're not in a congregation. We don't naturally embrace and enjoy and celebrate and help each other. It's all split up now, and we've lost the earth and the sun.
Some folks might be saying, well, so what do you guys say? Are you saying that, we turn the clock back, that we go back to living in the jungle or in the forest or whatever? We ditch all the technology? I mean, what are you guys saying here? What's the solution?
We can't all go and live in the Amazon, and most people wouldn't want to because actually they wouldn't have the physicality to do it. They don't have the feet. I mean, if you're going to be barefoot, you need tough, wide, very strong feet, especially on the jungle floor, And where we live, you cannot be barefoot for parts of the year. You have to have shoes. And there isn't enough sun to be healthy. I mean, people who live north of Atlanta, Georgia, don't make vitamin D from November to February. They don't make vitamin D. And this is why I theorized in a show that wasn't with you, and it just hit me. This is why those Nordic European cultures became so dairy dependent, because getting vitamin D through dairy, and this is apparently, I've learned, only through unprocessed dairy. You can't homogenize and pasteurize and do all that stuff because you kill off enzymes and vital nutrients, properties of the milk and the cheese. But these people were able to replenish in their bodies for a period of time when the sun was gone, the winter. They were able to replenish vitamin D through diet. And yet, here we are in our modern life going, oh, butterfat, milk, you can't have that. It's going to give you heart disease. But the fact is, that's why they were such a dairy consuming culture. And it was for lack of sun. And we need sun. We need it desperately. We need the earth desperately. And the ways that we can start to reintroduce this back into our lives is to, the people we did our biological darkness show, who are constantly in offices, I don't know what to suggest to them other than introducing light bulbs that replicate sunlight, infrared therapies. You have to spend some money, unfortunately. But what are you doing indoors except making money, right? Most of us. The best thing you could do is go find the earth somehow. Dig your heels in. Get the light. And we've got chemtrails over us. So we're increasingly being removed more and more and more from the earth. I looked into the work of Lynn Margulis, evolutionary biologist. And whether people want to say this is God's design or it's some aspect of evolution, what we did was we incorporated another life form into our bodies to digest our food and create energy for us. And these would be the bacteria that live in our gut and elsewhere in our body, and the mitochondria that exist in the center of each cell in the nucleus. Those are derived from ancient bacteria, mitochondria. They're not human. I had heard this, but I couldn't place it and I didn't grasp it. So our energy, our food breakdown into fats and lipids, and then the processing of those fats and lipids in the interior of the cell, those tasks are performed by another form of life, prokaryotic life in our eukaryotic bodies. We are two different kingdoms of life. So now we've got AI. AI is looming. Oh my God, they're going to put chips in us and they're going to make us more and more technological. The marriage of man with machine, the singularity, Ray Kurzweil, all these futurists, like Peter Thiel and all these transhuman movements and organizations. That, Mike, I bet you, is another unfolding of this Earth experiment, that we are now going to actually bring another form. Now, this is a non-life form, but for all we know, the difference between eukaryotes and prokaryotes could be as big as the difference between eukaryotes, prokaryotes that we are, and AI. So we are possibly going to be moving into a phase of this dimension where we will incorporate, as we did a long time ago, another form of existence, this artificial intelligence into our bodies. This could be the next phase, and therefore it could be unavoidable. And that's why we've undergone these separations from Earth and from Sun, because we're being pushed into this next phase of existence.
But how much of it is natural and how much of it is artificial? It's perplexing to me to try to get my head wrapped around what is humanity? What is it supposed to really be like?
If you think of everything as phasic, then the properties of one phase would be different from the properties of what was being pulled into that phase to turn it into the next phase. So at one point, we may have had, I'm just theorizing here, I'm just talking off the cuff, inorganic material on this earth. And then through this piezoelectric voltage creation, when you motion or mechanical force upon crystals, which minerals are, releases voltage. So when the voltage was released, because the first mechanical forces were exerted on inanimate matter, then that voltage created this thing called life. So first you had life that wasn't conscious. It just had basic properties that seemed unique to it. And there was movement that wasn't just the movement of forces like wind or this thing they call gravity, the downforce. But anyway, there's just a theory. So then you had a more complex form. Everything complexifies. This is the root of it. It's all this experiment that keeps unfolding and unfolding and unfolding. So you got from that this process of metabolic fermentation, anaerobic life. And there was no oxygen. It didn't use oxygen. And then there was another form of life created that was oxygen metabolizing called aerobic life. And each time the last form, like let's say the anaerobe said, what's this aerobic stuff? These are our enemies. We cannot have any of this. It's not to be. But it was to be because it happened in this continual unfolding. And then you got a situation where you had defined cell walls. Those are eukaryotes. And the life with the separation of nucleus and cytoplasm in the cells took into it the prokaryotes that don't have the defined cell walls. And again, there was a hue and cry on some level, saying, no, we don't want to be living in those things. Well, what do you mean? We want to be outside and independent. Those things are oxygen breathing. We are not oxygen tolerant. We don't want to live inside them, but they were brought in anyway. And then now this is where restore comes in, because restore has to do with the signaling, the redox signaling that goes on between the prokaryotic life forms in our bodies. And here we are saying restore is a wonderful thing. It's so helpful because it's helping to organize us on that prokaryotic level, the way that it interacts with our eukaryotic health metabolism. So now we've got another phase where there's this artificial, this inanimate, it's not even life, it's non-life, but in the unfolding, it is to mix with us. This is the directive coming from somewhere, and we're resisting it. And we're thinking there are those amongst us who are designing it. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe this is just the next wave of what is to be. And naturally, there are many of us who are balking and saying, no, I don't want AI running my body. But who knows where it's really going? I'm not trying to suggest that I'm in support of the marriage of man with machine. I'm just looking at it in a very perspectival way. It could be that this is where it's going.
Well, that was the point I was trying to make, and I know people are going to misinterpret it and say that you and I are talking pro-transhumanism, and we're not. What we're saying is we don't know, because we started from square one, and at square one we were this, and over time, today we are this. So all of this stuff transpired between square one and square 100, and now square 200 is out in the future. Something's going on. Somebody's making changes, or something is making changes. Something is introducing, or someone is introducing these alterations and tinkering with humans. And maybe we're at a point now where we understand it more from the standpoint of we understand technology, and we do have a lot of information today that we didn't have many, 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 many years ago. So I think a lot of things could have been done many, many, many years ago that, we had no idea what was going on. So it just happened. And today, because we have information, we can say, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing? That doesn't seem right to me. So it's kind of a very interesting, perplexing situation and line of questioning, in my view. And I know people are going to be really upset with you and I because this, even though we're trying to explain it, they're still going to say, you guys are being pro-transhumanism, and we're really not. We're just trying to understand how this process of evolution, and I even hate to use the word evolution because somebody's going to jump down my back about Darwinism, and that's not what I'm referring to. I'm talking about the changes that are going through man's mind and body.
Mike, let's not use even the word evolution. Let's not use natural. Let's not use those words right now, because we are describing and what I call a complexification. Ask the people who are annoyed with us for talking this way if they would like to go and live along one of the tributaries of the Amazon, like the Yequana, naked, with a bowl haircut, no shoes, walking on granite boulders. You know that Yequana babies, they're dunked in the rapids as when they're only a few days or weeks old. They're dipped in rapids by the ankles first, with the, to the ankles and then to the knees, and this is their environment and their training. And would you like to go and live there? You won't have a TV, you won't have a smartphone, you won't have shoes, you won't have, and the answer is, well, it's probably going to be no, I don't want to do that. And point number two is, I couldn't possibly do that. Benny of Joy Camp, he did a show recently with a friend, and they had gone to, I believe it was Peru, and he was so sick. He was so sick in the jungle. The amount of violent vomiting and the, constant mosquito bites and bugs and insects, the size of the insects, and we can't even comprehend these things. So that we can't go there. We're not cut out to go there. We've already moved past that. And we're sitting here, I'm looking at you in the video, you're surrounded by guitars hanging on the wall, you have headphones on your head, you've got all kinds of stuff in the background, amps. What the hell is that? How can you live like that?
Well, this would be stuff that I would take with me if I had to go back down to the jungle.
I think you would have to.
No, your point is right on, because as you're laying this out, I'm thinking to myself, I wouldn't want to do that. And I think of myself as, somebody who wants to stay strong organically, healthy mind, healthy body, and all that. That's why it's perplexing when we talk about this stuff and we talk about these tribes. It's like, well, okay. Then you start to really question how dedicated and how devoted you are when you take a look at these tribes and you think to yourself, there's no way I'm doing that. There's no way I'm going to walk around with a bowl haircut, half naked, in the jungle with big bugs.
No, and you don't want to sleep like that. It's okay maybe to try it for an hour, but you have to sleep all night on the hard ground or in a hammock at best. It's not like your, Sealy Posturepedic sleep number mattress that you can renew every few years. But so there's no way people like us would want to do that. And the reality is we have complexified beyond that. Now we're just talking about more complexification to the point that the technology that we have willingly surrounded ourselves with, and we've gone beyond the point where we can go to the jungle barefoot with a bowl haircut, and it's naked. So we are moving forward. And the good news is that this complexification, even though it's occurring at a rapid rate, you're not going to end up chipped necessarily. And you probably will be able to do something about it in your lifetime. In order for it to be appealing, it has to go slowly and it has to be sold generationally, right? Your grandkids may end up loving the fact that they're chipped.
Yeah, well, we see that now. We see these these YouTube clips where these companies are coming out and they're talking about putting a chip in their arm, and this way they can go up to the reader at work and the door will open, and they think that's the greatest thing since the light bulb. And I'm thinking to myself, there's no way I'm going to stick a chip in my arm just so that I can access a door. So you're right. I mean, there's going to be, generations that are going to think very, very differently than we do, and probably going to think that, you and I are very backwards and antiquated, because look at this great technological society that we have. And, Mike and Sophia were talking about not having all this. This is great. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is at the end of the day. I do know this, and I mentioned this before we get started with the show, Sophia, is that I'm not anti-technology by any stretch. If the technology were used for the benefit of humanity, to help humanity live a more natural, a more organic, healthier life, then I'm all for that. I think that's a good thing. The problem is that as we go down this path, there's a lot of really nasty, nefarious stuff that's attached to these technologies. And clearly the technologies are designed for confinement, and they're there for surveillance and to keep humanity contained and controlled. That's the issue I have with it.
Okay, let me throw an example at you, and I'm not sure if this is a good one, but I'm going to point out two things. So what is the difference between a Yequana or a Piraha in the jungle walking barefoot and being able to tell you exactly what animal passed where, because they can read the signs of the jungle, the bent leaves, the tracks. They have a knowledge that they have accrued that gives them enough ability to say, and it's a finesse. Let's call it a finesse, right? And so the modern man who walks up to a door, puts his wrist up, and boom, the door opens. That's a finesse as well, right? And the end result is that both are kinds of, I'm going to use this word very loosely, magic, that belong to these separate cultures. They've evolved out of these separate cultures. Now, I'll give you my example number 2, or set number 2, is this. The other day I was with a friend in her brand new car, and she was trying to get into a parallel parking space, and it was tight, and her car was showing her all these pictures on this little screen of what the space looked like from the outside, and she was able to adjust and back in and get into this tight spot perfectly. But it was because of pictures and images that the sensors on the car were showing her so that she could direct the proper moves that she was going to make with the steering wheel. Now, I don't have that in my car, and a person looking at me backing into a tight space, which I can do very successfully, frequently, they would look at me and go, wow, that's finesse. And they would look at my friend from the outside and say, that's finesse too. And outwardly, the results are the same, but they're not done by the same process. So all I'm saying is that these technologies we've wandered into by necessity because of the time that we have been born are simply ways of finessing our existence, and they are contextual.
But the thing is, Sofia, are the controllers not pointing us into a direction where we lose our freedom and sovereignty versus the tribes that have their freedom and sovereignty? In other words, we might be complexifying, but we're doing so in a way in which we are far more constrained, and we really don't have that natural sense of freedom anymore. How do you answer that question? I just put an article up on the blog today. It was a good video, and it's about biometrics and how advanced the biometrics technology has become, and how these airports and these airlines like Delta and JetBlue are deploying it. And most people have no idea. And the Department of Homeland Security said, look, if you don't want biometrics, the answer is pretty straightforward. Then you don't travel. That's your option. If you're going to travel, you're going to do biometrics. So my point being is that as we go through this process, as things become more and more complex, we're also losing our natural ability to be free.
My friend might say that it's complete freedom to be able to get into any parking space she wants to because the car can do it and help her do it. Not having freedom is, oh, damn, now I've got to keep looking because I'm not good enough to do this on my own. I don't have the instinctive or reflexive control. I don't have the mental power to assess from my various mirrors, which are also technologies, really. And, again, like I said before, this is a moving forward that has to do with time and place. We are in this time and place. I mean, would you like to live in Elizabethan England with no sewage and a hair shirt, basically, to keep warm? No.
This is why it becomes very perplexing. Clearly, things have gotten better from the standpoint of, like you said, you don't have raw sewage. You have bathrooms now, and all that stuff is taken care of. You don't have to travel by horse anymore. Now you've got vehicles. You have airplanes. So there's obvious advantages to moving along this timeline.
Yes, there are. And there were times when we were in this life where you couldn't let the fire go out. Where, now we have things like electric pilot lights. There are so many differences that we take for granted, but they are part of the context in which we live. And we don't want to go to another state, which would be inordinately more difficult. So I'm saying the way this is moving suggests that it's normal to be integrating things that are technological that are exogenous to make an endogeny out of them, bring them into us. This is the current direction. And I don't want chips in me any more than you do. But what am I doing in a house where I have temperature sensors? They're not smart. But, I don't have to be afraid if I don't want to. There are ways that I can set a thermostat on a heater to start heating the house before I come back. Now, the Yequana couldn't do that. They don't need heat, given their Amazonian location, but they live very, very differently. We live in situations where we want these improvements. And what we're not realizing, this was the dawning I had, is that the technologies separate us. When your computer dies or your car stops working, you are with a dead machine. And now you're dreading the cost of how to repair it. And the Yequana, they don't have those problems.
Right.
And if something, they get together, I read in the book that they don't even have competition between them as to who's the best hunter and whatnot. Because when somebody who's a good hunter comes in with a lot of catch, or a good fisherman, he shares it with everybody, so that nobody feels jealous. They have a whole different interpersonal way of being. I've always said, Mike, based on what a very wise man taught me many years ago, that our natural cooperation, because humans are cooperative, you can ask anyone the time and they'll dig in their backpack and take out a cell phone and they'll turn the screen on so that they can see the time to tell you. So human beings are cooperative, and that cooperation has been knocked into competition. And now I realize that is from a separation status that we endure in this slightly technological environment that's becoming increasingly technological. The competition is then undermined and altered and inflamed into conflict. And we have tremendous conflict amongst us. That's another quality of our existence that the tribes don't have. They have conflict from tribe to tribe, and that might be more territorial and pride based. I don't know, because I'm not an anthropologist, but they are not in conflict with one another the way we are. And we carry these feuds generationally. This family is against this family and whatnot. And then that is even more vulnerable to a state that the wise man who taught me said was eat or be eaten, kill or be killed. And that's a very low state of human existence if you have that much antipathy toward your fellow man.
So perhaps then the thought I had was the separation of the family and the community was necessary in order to implement the technology. If you are a community or a tribe, you don't really see a need for technology, so you naturally resist it. Whereas the process of separation evolved over time with the introduction of various types of lifestyles and social norms and so on. And so then technology was introduced along that timeline. It was inserted at various points, and then we ended up where we are today. That was just a thought I had, Sofia. We're going to catch a lot of shit for this show because people are going to think that we're, I know I said this before, but they're going to think that we're pro transhumanism and we're just trying to vet this thing and philosophize through it and kind of understand how things have changed and why over time.
Mike, don't worry about what people are going to think, because we are thinking outside the box. It's not easy to do. And we're doing it because it creates a different direction to the conversation. I mean, we could be in what I called once before with you, the Ain't It Awful Club.
Yep.
Yeah, and great. Let's be in the Ain't It Awful Club and beat our drum and cry and moan. Or let's try to think what has been going on and what seems to be going on. And to get back to your point about separation, my thesis was that when we were separated from the earth and the sun, we then had to resolve problems that those conditions themselves created with technologies, shoes, shelters, ways to create heat, ways to create food, because food wouldn't be so abundant when it didn't grow and the land didn't produce it. And the technologies created separation, because now we created technology for us. The house separates us from the next house. So that was where the separation, the first separation was with the earth and the sun. The second separation was between us. And the reliance on technology just kept growing and growing and growing. And we began to pride ourselves on our ability to make newer and better technologies. And that's what we have become. We have become people who have an innate dissatisfaction with things that cannot be improved.
Yeah. So we're always looking for the next best thing. We're looking for the next advancement, the next thing that's going to make our life better, easier.
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend who just invented something in the last 6 months that has never been invented before. He doesn't understand why. It's a solution to a very simple technical problem. And his market is huge. Huge. He can't believe it. He is sitting on a platinum mine explosion. And he doesn't understand why it happened to him, why nobody thought of this before. So that's the nature of the beast today is, wow, I just figured this out. Who would have thunk, right?
Yeah.
And the markets, we are all about consumer markets now. So
it's all about consumerism.
Yeah. So consumerism is for and about technology. If you don't have the need for things, if you don't need clothes and you don't need machines and food is within arm's reach and it's always there, and that's your relationship with the land that you're on, that you're born on, then what use do you have for Costco or Walmart or Hanukkah Schlemmer?
I mentioned earlier, before we got on the show, that talking about consumerism, that when people talk about economic collapse and all that stuff and fiat money, that I explained to them that the fiat money is actually backed by something. It's backed by consumerism. So as long as people want that flat screen TV or that new car or that new home or, that new set of clothing or whatever it may be, the money will stay in play. It'll have value. To me, it's all part of the whole process of, again, it's technology, right? I mean, it's technology that's driving that. It's technology that's driving your consumerism. It's driving your economy. It's driving what you value your money to be. It's really amazing when you take a look at what technology really means to your life and to the existence of humans. It plays a part in virtually everything, if not everything.
Yeah, and because of obsolescence of one kind of technology, sometimes it's difficult to hold on to it because the machine just craps out, I mean, it's not, there's this planned obsolescence, but a car that's a certain age at some point will be unable to run unless you devote your energy to replacing all the parts. And sooner or later, you're going to run into a part that just isn't available anymore, and then you have to get a new car. And now you're in a new wave of technology. You don't want a car that's all full of wireless sensors and it's going to break when it feels like it and tell you things about tire wear and whatnot. maybe that's the problem with holding on to the old technologies, is you hold on to them as long as you can, and then boom, your only options, unless you go on eBay or something, you can't get an older generation. Now you're stuck. So where is it all going? What can we really do except understand that this is how it's unfolding? And we came here, Mike, in this time, to this place. We have some message to make, some awareness to form. And just because you and I are having this discussion does not mean we are Ray Kurzweilians. It doesn't mean that.
No, we're just having the conversation because we're taking a look at the reality of what's going on around us. It's happening, and most people are completely drawn to and buying into what's being rolled out. So if you're a thinking person, you're going to step back and you're going to think to yourself, well, what's going on here? I'm sitting here thinking this, but I feel like the lone wolf in the woods. There are people that obviously that are paying attention. They consider themselves to be aware or awakened and so on. But as I've said to so many folks, Sophia, and is that when you take a look around you and you see the people that are interacting in your community or your town and in your society, they are marching right down that road of technology. They just keep steady march. And, we don't really know what the end state is. We really don't know what the goal line looks like. I mean, we're told things as to what they think it's going to look like or how it's going to be, but you really don't know. So in a way, people are marching forward blindly. That's the thing, I guess, that concerns me the most, is that there's a blind following to what's being rolled out. And there's not a lot of people really they're not asking meaningful questions. That's my view.
Hey, I'm going to sound like a New Yorker. Don't worry about it. Forget about it.
Yeah, okay. Maybe I think about it too much. I've been known to do that.
But see, my point is, you can experience joy, and that's our mission, Mike. We, like the Piraha who laugh when their hut blows down, like the Yequana she talks here about carrying a large dugout canoe with a bunch of Yequana and her 2 Italian friends. And she said the Italians were tense, frowning, cussing while they were trying to lug this heavy canoe over these granite boulders. And everybody was slipping and sliding, even the Yequana. And you were scraping your ankles, your shins, bleeding on these granite boulders. And she said the Yequana just laughed. They even laughed when one man got pinned underneath the canoe. And he laughed even louder. The man himself was laughing. He laughed even louder when he was unpinned because he had this tremendous relief. And this is what we don't do. We cuss. Just look at people's faces in rush hour in their cars. They're distracted, they're sweaty, angry, cussing. And gosh, we could relax. And we could assume, because we are a relaxed living creature, that the concept of life, the fact that we're alive, will roll a possibility of solution at us. And our job is simply to notice it and grab it.
Well, that's a very metaphysical approach, and I agree. There's going to be a natural flow that will lead you to a road that is going to put you on a better path. The problem is that most people just will not even consider something like that because of the way society and the culture is designed, where people are always looking for some form of, or expecting some form of repercussion, Sophia. It takes a very special person and a very strong person to be able to take a step back and take a deep breath and say, all right, just calm down, relax. Things are going to work out. I'm not going to get riled up. I'm not going to get angry. I'm not going to worry. Just going to play through it.
I'll tell you, Mike, honestly, when you're in connection with the earth and the sun and you're taking Restore, for instance, somebody wrote to me, she had only been taking Restore for a few days, and she said, I just lost my wallet yesterday or whenever it was, very recently. And she said, you know what? Instead of blowing up about it, becoming very angry and very upset, I wasn't even fazed. I just took care of everything that needed to be replaced. And that was that. And so it's when you don't have that in arms phase, when there's no continuum in your society, in your group, when you are cut off from the sun and the earth, that's when you get all bent out of shape. And what we have innately, we have the biochemistry to handle problems. If only we would do it in a relaxed way, if only we would reach out to people around us and say, hey, I'm having a tough time. Would you like to help me? So we're trained not to do that.
Right. We are trained not to do that. You have your inner circle. And, some people have a very small inner circle. Some might have one that's a little larger. But outside of that immediate inner circle, people will not venture outside of that space to go ask for help or ask for assistance. And then you're really screwed if the people within your inner circle don't, deem your problem to be big enough or a concern of theirs. And so, you're basically left out on your own. So it's very interesting. And it circles back to, we can't turn things backwards. We can't go back in time and say, oh, we're going to go live like these tribes. That's just not going to happen. But we can learn from these tribes, and we can connect back to the innate abilities that they have, and a sense of happiness, the sense of being grounded, the sense of being connected to the earth, to help us even in this age of technology, where everything is constantly going, run, rush, worry, and stress and all that stuff. And if we're able to bring back some of these basics that we had at one time, I think that will help to balance out a lot of stuff in our lives. Like you said, the lady with the wallet, she lost her wallet. Now, most people would lose their wallet and they'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe this. My license is in there, my credit cards and so on. And I have to go get everything changed now. And they build themselves up into a fury. Whereas you say, you know what? It is what it is. Complaining about it, getting angry about it, whining about it is not going to magically bring the wallet back. It's just not going to go poof and appear in front of me. So, she did it very calmly and she did what she had to do and then she moved on. And that's just so much better, right? I mean, that's just, I don't know, if more people operated like that, it would be a lot calmer and a lot better place to live.
Absolutely. We just have to, chill, like they say. Just chill. Don't worry about it. I keep saying there's a reason I'm here at this time in this world doing what I'm doing. There's a reason, some reason. I don't know what it is really. I kind of have some dim idea that maybe I'm doing the right thing right now, finally. The work that people are kind enough. Thank you, everyone who does this, to write to me and say that it's valued and they appreciate it. You appreciate it. It's wonderful to read that. It makes me very excited. It makes me very happy that, wow, I stumbled into something and I'm connected to all these people. They're listening. People are listening to us and they say, wow, this is different. This is a different way of thinking. And that's what we need, Mike, because the way we think, this ain't it awful style of thinking is not making our body happy. It's just capsizing everything in all different directions.
Yeah, it's putting people into a spiral. If you keep talking about what's wrong, what's bad, what's not going well, you can't stay on that path. You just can't. First of all, you'll just wear yourself out. And that's not what you're here for. You're not here for that. You're not here to be hunkered down and stressed out all the time. If you are hunkered down and you are stressed out all the time, then what you need to do is you need to take a couple of steps back and pause and take stock in what it is that you have surrounded yourself with. And I'm talking about things and people and the things that you focus on, and evaluate yourself and assess. Some people are not spiritual people, but my take on it is that you have to plug back into your spirituality. You have to connect back into that divine aspect, because we are all divine beings. We have that spark within us. And what this place is all about dousing, pouring water on that spark, making you wander around aimlessly in the dark and worry about stuff all the time. And, if you can pull yourself back in and you can see that spark again and you can understand and you can get the bigger picture going and you understand that you are a part of that bigger picture, then I think that, actually, I know things will get a lot better for a lot more people.
People are increasingly disconnected now, which is going to make that complexification, that integration with AI and technology all the more easy, right? That's where we're going. And most of these people who are disconnected, as you've described, are going to have no quote unquote problem with that. So you and I, who have different kinds of, you call it spirituality. I would say to people who don't use the word spirituality or like it or believe they need to be spiritual, what is your spirit? Every one of us has a spirit. And we are here to live in a spirited way. We're here to express that spirit, not to have, be in the doldrums and have it knocked out of us and be this very unhappy, unthriving creature. Somehow there's got to be a way to thrive in the context of what's going on with you and around you. You've got to say, wow, I just did this. It could be over a small thing, but there are small things that can give us joy. And I'm not trying to sound like Pollyanna, but I just think that this is a puzzle. This whole Earth experience, this whole dimensional compression does not have to compress us entirely. We can still spring. And when we spring, when we do this rebound out of the feeling of being compressed, we're actually doing it. We're busting through the third dimension.
Absolutely. You're right. Everybody has that spirit. Everybody has that spark. And you have to identify that you have it, and you do have to thrive. This is not all about being a punching bag when you come down here. If you are a punching bag day in and day out, and some people punch themselves, they beat themselves up, you have to stop doing that. And there are a lot of very basic, simple things in life that can make you happy. Oh, what types of things, Mike? Well, you must have some interests, hobbies, things you want to learn to do. You like reading books, playing piano, playing guitar. You like art. You like walking on the beach. You like going swimming. There's so many things that you can take time to do that will offset all the other nonsense that is taking place in your life. I always tell people, Sofia, that balance does not mean equal. To bring balance in your life only means that you do something enough so that the scales balance out. So you might go to work all day and you might work 8 to 10 hours a day. But if you're able to, when you come home, to do something that you really enjoy doing, it may be as simple as spending quality time with your children. It could be going for a walk with your significant other, doing anything, going for a swim. Just that break in the routine will help offset all the shit that took place in your life 8 hours before at work. So I think there needs to be that balance, and people have to figure out what is it that I would like to do that I'm not doing enough of or that I'm not doing any of, and start doing those things more.
See, I had a friend once who was very roly-poly, and he ate a half gallon of Dreyer's ice cream every night, and I think it was a huge hamburger that was the size of an entire skillet. And that's what he ate, that for dinner every night. His hamburger and his Dreyer's ice cream.
Every night? Every
night. And he just got fatter and fatter.
Holy smokes.
So we had a mutual friend who was a bodybuilder. And I remember him saying to me, the bodybuilder, well, I just told, let's call him Al. I just told Al, look, he said to me, what should I eat? And I described things to him, and he looked at me blankly. Well, I can't eat that. I can't. And I would say, look, Al, just whatever you ate yesterday, don't eat it today. Eat something different. And so only having those 2 menu items, that gave him wide berth to experiment. But I would say, whatever you don't like doing today, then stop doing it. That way you won't complain about it, and do something different. And it's up to you. Just do things until you find something you like.
That's right. That's taking responsibility. I mentioned, Sofia, that too many folks are waiting for somebody else to point and to direct them and to tell them what to do and how to be happy. Too many people look for happiness through other people. You have to be happy yourself. You have to do your inner work. You have to be yourself. You have to be happy about yourself. You have to be happy living in your own skin, and, well, I don't like the way I look and all that stuff. Well, there's things that you can do to get on that path where you start feeling good about yourself mentally and physically. It's complicated. It's not, a lot of people are looking for a very simple answer with a box with a big bow slapped on top of it, and they want it hand delivered to them. And it's just, that's not life.
Well, I just opened up the Continuum Concept while you were talking, and I decided I'm just going to pick something out of it. And she uses this term, the Continuum Experience Quotient. And she's referring to an example of a baby who isn't getting enough handling. So his Continuum Experience Quotient is near zero. So I would say to the people who are unhappy to start seeking to raise their Continuum Experience Quotient. I mean, maybe you do it by going outside. Then you have a continuum experience with the sun. Maybe you are barefoot. And don't just think that the earth is dirt, that it's dirty. This is another artifact of modern society, that dirty. I don't want that on my feet. I'll get dirty. Just put your feet on the dirt and soak up the continuum, because it's coming into your body, and then start smiling at people and talk to them, strangers. The piezoelectric charge that you get mutually will create the beginning of a continuum experience. That's it.
That is it. I'm going to recommend that folks buy the book. It is the Continuum Concept, and it's not a lengthy book. It's 164 pages. And I think it's well worth the read, because it's going to pose some very, very important questions that folks need to really think about and think through and contemplate about life, about our existence, and how to bring back, like I mentioned before, some of those basics and those foundational aspects of ourselves that perhaps got lost over time. And by bringing some of those things back, maybe we can put ourselves and get ourselves on a better path going forward.
And just so people know, there's also a website, continuumconcept.org, but there's a hyphen between continuum and concept. And there's a lot of material on that website, a lot of articles, and you can really get a good sense of what the book and the Continuum Concept is about by visiting the website. There's an active organization, I think it's in Sausalito, California. Jean Liedloff herself died at 84. It was a few years ago. But she's quite a genius for having seen all this. And I thank her from my heart for having written this book and made this all clear and known to us. And now it's our task is just to implement it, starting in a small way. So thank you, Mike. I enjoyed the show as well. I think you and I dare say we have a kind of brand. I hate to use that commercial word, but we have a sort of type of show that we do, and I'm learning that it is gratifying to people to listen to, and that is of great pleasure and joy to me. So thank you, Mike, and thank you, the audience.
Well, the same here, Sophia, and the trick is that we're just two friends having a conversation. That's basically it in a nutshell. We very rarely, folks, ever script anything. Sophia will do her newsletters. I will read them. I don't connect with Sophia to talk about the newsletters beforehand. We just do the show and we let the conversation flow. So if you enjoy the format, it's because it's two friends speaking.
And that is the Continuum Concept right there.
There you go. All right, Sophia. So until next time, which I'm sure will be next month, we'll reconvene and we'll talk about your next newsletter. I think that'll wrap it up. Do you have anything that you want to say about your store before we go?
Only that I urge people to try Restore and take it conservatively. If you need to, start with a quarter teaspoon. If you have a lot of challenges, this is the, recommended course to take when you are a person with lots of gut issues. But we all have leaky gut. We really do. And when it starts to reorganize you inside, you feel a whole lot better. So give it a shot. And I sell it at Avatar, AVATAR products.com. And thank you, everyone who's bought it. My shipping is a little more expensive than other places. It's because of my PayPal shopping cart. But what I do when you order for instance, a quart size of Restore, don't be off-put by the shipping because I give you a couple of little gifts. You will get a tube or a jar of magnesium cream to try. And that honestly is a phenomenal experience and product unto itself. So I do supply a little bit of extra trial size samples and gifts. And my regular customers get larger gifts. The more I recognize your name, the more you tend to get. So thank you, everybody.
And that concludes another Sage of Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.
Sometimes I feel so tired, but today I feel so wired. And I look through my crystal ball. All I see is that wall. So many people are standing still, drifting away. They lost their will. I just want to shake them and give them ears. Wake up, stop living in fear. You are human. You are a beautiful soul. You are one with creation. Come on, get up, let's go. Sometimes I feel so cheated, but today I won't be defeated. I cut the chains and I break free. Open your eyes and you will see. You are human. You are a beautiful soul. You are one with creation. Come on, get up, let's go. You are a beautiful soul.